Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. This is my show that I do every week on Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, a deep dive, and having a good time while doing it. And today I have a pretty powerful show planned, if I do say so myself. I created a framework to articulate a distinction to be made between different leader types. And I decided to name that the alignment leader types. And I decided to use the visual of different types of metal to do it. It started off with metal, METTLE, and that just sort of segued naturally to metal, METAL, and here we are, and this is what I do. I'm always trying to find these models and frameworks to sort of take these complex, sometimes ambiguous ideas and just simplify them so that people can actually implement them. Now, another thing, I've been in meetings all morning, so excuse my voice being a little jacked up, but I'm still rocking to go. Another thing that if you are watching on either the YouTube page or one of the Facebook pages, you'll notice in the description there is a link for the leadership alignment assessment. And basically, I'm giving you in this talk the mythology behind the system that assessment is designed to implement. So I still want you to watch this first, right? So don't. Some of you guys some of them already fucking clicked away, I'm sure, and hit it. But certainly when you're done at some point after we do this show, check that out, and I think you'll enjoy the process. Spent a lot of time on it, and I'm pretty stoked with the outcome. Gotten good feedback so far from my personal coaching clients and mastermind members. So check that out, and we'll get there. So before we do that, I guess that housekeeping. Yeah, we'll do that obviously. But aside from that, if you guys are not getting my emails, go to masterchimletter.com, and sign up for those emails. I send one every day. They're free. I did not send one today for this talk because I spent, as usual, a dysfunctionally large amount of time creating the thumbnail, right, for today's thing. Oh, I always like the thumbnail, but man, I spent so much damn time doing it. But that being said, I hope all those people that were supposed to get an email today still found their way to the show. And I'm showing that people watching, the numbers going up. So I'm glad that you are here. Give me a shout out if you're watching right now. Say what's up. I like these talks to be, organic and open in its format. If I wanted to just deliver a, professional production level, presentation of a curriculum or a system, I would just record it, right? So the whole idea of this, I want this to be a little bit more organic. What do we have? Jesse, what's going on, brother man? Good to see you. Aaron, you made it. I will tell you right now, Aaron, when I was just talking about, and Jamie, what's up? I see you too. When I was just talking about, I forgot to send the email to the list. I was thinking of you guys, my two operators up in Canada. But I'm glad you made it. I'll be honest, I didn't realize I didn't send it till just now. But what I will say to those of you who I just told to get on my email list, followed by me saying I forgot to send my email today. On Wednesdays, because I do this, the email is usually dedicated to all the content concerning this show. So if you're here, you're doing it right. If you're not, though, what am I going to do? Right? So I will say that I got a bunch of stuff to go over today. So let's hit it. As you guys are listening to this and I'm presenting this content, I'm going to be doing some screen sharing in a moment. I have a big list of stuff to go over. Just write the questions in the comments, in the chats, whatever, and I will definitely hit it. Johnny Groove, what's up, brother man? I see you. Good to see you, my man. All right. So this idea of alignment, it's really featured more prominently in my content as of late, because a lot of times with me as a coach, men are presenting me with challenges they're having, and it's not like I'm a doctor and they have a disease and it's like, here, take this medicine and you'll be fine. It's not as sort of you know causal in its effect with people. Sometimes it's really, I'm offering a different perspective, and I'm sitting next to them looking at this issue they have in front of them, just creating a little bit more feedback than they might be able to generate on its own. And being that that's the case, and men have a lot of these diverse applications of obstacles, sometimes the metaphors, analogies, and models and stuff and such that I use to help them just differ significantly from person to person. Over time, though, and I've been doing this for a while, there tends to be some overlap and some commonality that's sort of engraved into the canvas of the coaching that I do. And one such concept is this idea of alignment, right? And when it came to the three roads model, which was predicated on me introducing Tribalnomics, the book that, what did I make, 5 years ago at this point? I think 2020. I published that. It started, it kept evolving from there. And the three roads is really, I think, the structure that I'm going to be fleshing out for the rest of the rest of my days. I didn't mean to sound so fatalistic, but the idea of it is, this is now the playground, the battlefield in some cases, where we're going to do our best work as men. And the idea of alignment is at the core of that. In every man, there's a battle between his will, his loyalty, and his purpose. When the three of them are fighting, the man winds up weak no matter what. It's inevitable. That fractured misalignment is always going to produce a negative outcome. And that's despite how good he looks, how strong he looks, how much the guy looks like he's got his shit together. And you guys out there, you know what I'm talking about. We'll put on the mask, we'll present the facade. But if we have that misalignment going on internally, it's just a matter of time before it has to be dealt with. And that alignment specifically between power, right, what I would call self-power, brotherhood, and then the mission that's pursuing the value, that, when it comes to leadership, really determines what type of leader an individual is. We all have had bosses, leaders, people in charge of us, authority figures of some sort, and know that there are people, people in those positions, leaders in those positions that we have liked, ones that we have disliked. But out of the ones we've liked, there have been a different type of leader, at the helm, and the ones that we didn't like. Sometimes we'll have this type of leader that we liked, but that same type of leader in another instance we don't like, based on the individuals. So there are these different leader types, and that diversity is really going to be sort of determined by who the individual is and the alignment that he has internally. Speaking about his three roads specifically. Some men, when things get rough, when it gets hot, they melt. And in terms of alignment, that's where I like using that word fracture. Everything is synced up, and suddenly there's enough stress to the system that it fractures, and the misalignment occurs after that. Some don't melt, though. Some don't fracture. Some bend, and they're not dysfunctional, but they're giving maybe a little bit more than they would prefer. And then there's the other type that is so structurally sound. He could not only hold his shape in the face of that heat, but he also winds up forging the people around him to be able to be more formidable themselves. And what I just described is the sort of foundation of these three archetypes of the bronze, iron, and steel leaders. So what I did was I prepared a whole list. Man, I hope this isn't going to get technologically overwhelming for my computer. But we're going to figure it out. I created a bullet point list for each one of these leader types. I don't like creating frameworks to the point where they start looking like scripts for these talks, because I got to go off on my tangents as I go. So I figured a lot of times I have a list, or in this point, I guess it's still a list, but it's a bullet point list as opposed to some sort of countdown. And I'm going to describe each one of these leader types with a little bit more detail, and I'm going to run through some of this stuff. But at the end of it, you're going to understand the distinction between what is a bronze leader type, a iron leader type, and a steel leader type. So, like I said before, any questions, just put them in the chat. All right, so let's get fancy here. All right, bam. All right, so rather than make a bunch of slides, I went a little bit more guerrilla style, and we just made a Google Doc, and we're going to go over it. So the bronze leader type, I call him the unready. He lives in survival mode. Everything feels urgent, but nothing feels important. There's so many bullet points here. I'm going to want to sort of dwell on some of them, but excuse me if I just run through some of them in between those sort of tangents. Just know that every single one of these would be scripted if I was doing it differently, right? He starts strong, but he rarely finishes. Discipline depends on mood. There are no ritual anchors. I've spoken before about, are you somebody who's great in great situations, but terrible in terrible situations? Overall, that is not a strong leader. You know, if your mood or circumstance determines how effective you are at leading the people who are trusting you to lead them, right? He reacts to pressure with emotion, anger, withdrawal, or blame. It's a very typical reaction for these lower level leader types to allow emotion and sort of instinct, undisciplined instinct, to drive where they're going to go and how they're going to respond to situations. And we know that's sort of what animals do. Right? So we don't want to be following our wild animal formulas when we are put in charge of leading people towards a mission. He needs validation before action. Approval is oxygen. This is what keeps him going. He needs that feedback loop that tells him he's doing a good job. The problem with that, and you know this from Tribalnomics, is if you have a leader, he has that sort of third-party perspective where he looks at the group that's following, he looks at the mission, the goal that he's trying to bring them to, and he's trying to tell them, this is the way you're supposed to go. But if he's just looking for approval, suddenly the people who are following have a seat at the table. They're determining the trajectory of where you're going to go. And you can see how this starts to be incongruent, ineffective at least, when a leader is asking or seeking the approval at a dysfunctional level from the people he's leading. He avoids confrontation to keep peace, even when it costs respect. I can't tell you guys enough with the work that I've done with men. If you can't handle a confrontation, then you're either going to be controlled by your circumstances, or in order to maintain control, you will seek out smaller circumstances, right? Small men leave small lives. You know, you've heard me say that before. His circle is easy to impress, but quick to disappear. This is another deficiency in the bronze leader type. At this level, he's somebody who doesn't really understand how to drive that overlap of loyalty. He's somebody that, you know, he might try to make people impressed enough to follow him. He might bribe them. He might threaten them. But it's some sort of quick burning fuel that is keeping that connection alive. He talks about goals in vague motivational terms, someday language. This is something that's prevalent. If you guys remember, I told you guys a story about running into a childhood friend some years back where I asked him what he was up to, and he said he was going to open up a sneaker store. And when I was asking him specific questions about it, I was really, just showing him that I realized he was full of shit. He was just saying something that he thought I would find impressive, but when look sort of behind the curtain, there was nothing there. He keeps busy to avoid reflection. Nothing keeps a poor leader from being frustrated than distractions, making mountains out of molehills. And you'll see this with low-level leaders all the time. They will sort of react out of proportion to obstacles. They will create distractions for mission because it's something that keeps them from introspectively realizing or coming to grips with the fact that they're not doing a good job. This type of leader defines worth by comparison, not contribution. So the leadership style of the bronze leader. He has an unpredictable energy followed by burnout. And when I talk about the leader, the identity frame, one of the things that is in my self power system, it is how the individual frames his identity internally. And one of those components, there's three of them. One of them is the mask, right? And the mask is the thing that we wear to create the outputs in our alliances. And the mask is sort of how we get along with this ally to produce the output or the synergy that this ally represents. It is when you go to work, you don't curse, you wear a suit and tie maybe, you use different language as you're speaking, you conduct yourself in a different way. That's the mask. When you're by yourself, you act differently. When you're with your close friends, you act differently. When you're at the supermarket, you act differently. And all those, I use that model of the mask because it's really you projecting what you think will create the best output. The problem is when that mask, the further away that mask gets from who you are, meaning the more offset that mask is, the heavier it is and the more it weighs on you and the closer or the faster the pace towards burnout, towards needing that sort of recovery protocol. And if you can't keep up, you're losing more than you're gaining. Eventually, you wind up, having some sort of cathartic event, which I talk about in the bucket model, if you guys have ever seen that, right? This leader type, under pressure, because I thought this was a good distinction to flesh out for them. He fractures fast and then rationalizes the break. He breaks down, things go sideways, and the first thing he does is explain why it was everybody's fault but his own. Sometimes he says, there was nothing that could be done. A lot of times these types of leaders sort of blame a cog in the machine, and the machine is something that they're in control of. So again, they're avoiding that accountability. What do they need? What does this leader need? He needs structure. He must master his state before seeking mission. This is one of the things that I first start working with men with. And really, my ability to sort of gain some ground with this determines the trajectory of the working relationship that I have with men. If they can't handle the feedback, it's very hard for me to be of value to them. If the feedback that they get from me, they perceive as some sort of existential threat at the highest levels. At the lowest levels, it's, they take it as offense or as some sort of an insult. Almost like the doctor telling you, yeah, you're about to have a heart attack if you don't lose weight. And you saying, well, fuck you, your mother's fat. It's like, well, okay, but still has nothing to do with this. Well, my ability to work with people in the beginning is really influenced by their ability to take that feedback. And listen, I could turn up the heat, obviously. The pressure process is literally the name of my coaching program, but it's still, if you can't get feedback, then how are you supposed to finally build who you are, right? Like it's self-sabotage at its finest, right? So if you can't master your state, there's no way that you're going to be able to seek mission. So what do we got here? We got Monk. What's up, brother, man? Good to see you. Aaron writes, I know a song with the line, when everybody loves me, I will never be lonely, which seems fitting here. Dysfunctional indeed. Absolutely. Absolutely. Judge Cohen. What's up, brother, man? Good to see you. I'll be seeing you soon. Monk writes, loyalty today is a dying contract because you understand it. stand it just like honor. However, I'm old school when it comes to that stuff. I have the motorcycle club culture flowing through my veins, and things are just different now. I blame our education system and dental parenting. Dental parenting. Okay. Yarn Saxon, what's up, Don? Good to see you. So on that loyalty thing, I would say, Monk, that I make the distinction, and this isn't in relation to what you had said, but just to sort of add, and I offer this, there's a difference between people who are being loyal and loyal people. And it's a semantic distinction, but one that I make to be able to articulate the difference in the two. There are some people who are not, I would say, generally loyal people. I wouldn't consider them a loyal people, even though you might be able to observe and identify a loyal alliance that the individual has. Like that guy is loyal to him, not loyal to anybody else, but loyal to him. But he will fuck you over in a heartbeat. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people who I would consider to be loyal people. And loyal people, they sort of self-inflict a debt. They self-impose, maybe inflict isn't the word, feels like that sometimes, but they self-impose a debt whenever somebody invests in them. So a loyal person, it's very hard for them to walk away without reciprocating to somebody else. Now, if you know anything about influence and human psychology, Cialdini's book, Influence, talks about this. Reciprocation is a great way, a powerful way to get somebody to act, to influence them. So if I'm doing something for somebody and it creates a pressure in them to reciprocate, I'm really generating that energy in the loyal part of who they are. And the more loyal a person is, the more they will feel compelled to reciprocate. But that's not to say there aren't people who do not inherently feel that sense of reciprocation, yet still identity-wise connect to being loyal to an individual ally, right? So just a distinction there, I think, of value. Monk said it was gentle parenting, not dental. You know what, Monk? I apologize for not being able to figure that out on my own. But gentle parenting, I agree. And I agree. All right. So let's get to, you guys could still, yeah, all right. This shit's actually working out. Let's get to the Iron Leader. The Iron Leader is the reformer. Feel free to read ahead, but I'm going to go through it anyway. It's when I determined that I was not going to make an individual card, like for a slideshow for each one of these, that I was like, you know what, if they read ahead, so it doesn't fucking matter, right? Anyway, the Iron Leader I call the reformer. The Iron Leader recognizes when he's out of alignment and corrects course faster than before. He's aware, right? The Iron Leader is the one that is aware. He understands he has flaws, but he is engaged in correcting them as effectively and efficiently as he can. So he may not be as effective as he will be one day, but he's aware and he holds himself accountable. He keeps rituals, but sometimes loses rhythm under chaos. Everybody has a point where they are disrupted. And the question is always, are you disrupted at a functional, normal level of pressure? If you're somebody who, I use the phrase, you don't want to be the guy that cries when it rains. It's like, man, if a natural occurrence like raining affects your emotional state to the point where you are dysfunctional, you got some fucking work to do, right? So it's not that people don't break. It's do they break before they've done their job, right? And the Iron Leader is somebody who understands where he is in that and could still identify those times where he's thrown off course. He uses discomfort as feedback instead of excuses. This is an upgrade from the Bronze Leader. This is now somebody who's saying, you know what? I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to put the facts down and figure it out. He tracks his habits, training, and finances. He starts building systems. I think it was Peter Drucker who said, what gets measured gets managed. If you don't have an understanding, a numerical understanding of your reality, how are you ever going to manipulate it in a way that you could tell it is progressing in the direction you want? He begins to say no to people who drain his energy. Oh man, I can't tell you how important this is. I just had a virtual assistant that I had to let go, and I found myself on the verge of trying to engage and correct what was starting to be a mistake that he was making. And I caught myself, and it's like, yeah, I got too much shit to do. I can't sit here and fix his ability to do a good job that I'm paying him for. So it's like, hey, very professional, everything, build the bridge, all the alliance code stuff, but it's like this guy's taking too much of my time, and I have to adjust. So he gets a no. Values brotherhood, but still struggles with trust and delegation. This is something I remember myself pushing through. As I was, I consider myself to be a recovering tyrant. And as I was progressing through that sort of tyrannical, archetype of leadership, I really had to get over the fact that, there is such a thing as being gun shy. A meme that I made a couple of years ago, I called it Respect the Axe. It was a shirt that I made, Respect the Axe. And the phrase, the saying that I put along with it is, when a man is younger, he grabs his axe too early and too often. But as he gets older, the problem is he may not grab it early or often enough. And there is a point where we have to still invest in people, despite the bad outcomes that other investments may have generated with people, right? So that is something that this level or archetype of leader really has to deal with. He has to manage. Holds himself and others accountable, but sometimes over controls. Again, he's not steady enough to be completely consistent in the eyes of those he leads, and he is going to find himself still out of alignment on some issues, right? And that's sort of like the whole context of this. Thinks more strategically, measures time as an investment, not a waste. Understands that time is the most valuable resource that we have, right? This is somebody that says, you know what? I don't want to just sprint towards a goal or an outcome or a task. I want to sit here and take a second to figure out what is the best way to do it, because I understand if I rush these things, I may wind up wasting time, and that's the most valuable resource of all. Missions emerging, he could articulate direction, but not yet flow. That's one of the things that whenever I'm doing something new, and I would say when I started using, I'll give you a good example. What eventually became the Tribalnomics system first was the loyalty matrix, and you could actually see it, the original image on the wall here of the loyalty matrix, which was on a whiteboard presentation I did just one night in front of White Boy Pat and one of my old students when he was asking about tribe. And it was a bunch of models that I had used for years to describe, the individual pieces of it. But I had never really created an overall model, a sort of meta model of tribe, and a system that could be consistently presented. And that's where Tribalnomics came from. But one of the things I had to do when I first created Tribalnomics was I had to start using the Tribalnomics language. I had to start using the specific terminology of Tribalnomics as opposed to the loyalty matrix terminology. I used to have these two terms, Lin and Lout. Loyalty in was Lin, loyalty out was Lout. Not the best terminology to put in your system, right? One sounds Chinese, the other one sounds like, something negative. But the idea of it is when we do something new, we might have the emerging understanding of mission, but articulating it is not yet at that flow state, right? When you build a relationship with something, after a while, you do have access to that, right? But at this stage, this iron leader may not. Right. So his leadership style, right? And again, we're talking about the iron leader. Leadership style is he's disciplined in his grind. He's getting after it consistently. He's looking at his 24-hour cycle and he's expecting some sort of outcome at the end of each. He inspires through visible effort. He's somebody who may not be able to solve everybody's ills, but he is modeling the type of behavior that people could do the work themselves to sort of figure out, right? Under pressure, This is the individual that bends. He doesn't break. He doesn't fracture or melt like the bronze leader that we spoke about before. He bends, he learns, reforms, and he repeats. This is somebody who is at least in the iterative game. He is error correcting with every new experience, every new rep. What does this archetype need? He needs integration. He needs to align his tribe with his standards. So if we're looking at the 3-road model, right? I preface this whole thing by saying we have the self, the tribe, and the value, right? And we could look at it, put a bunch of different terms to draw that distinction. But if you are an individual who doesn't understand who you're supposed to be and doesn't understand what your tribe is tasked you with getting them to, you wind up making compromises where you needn't. And once you're aware, I would say even capable, starts to play more of a role. This alignment is something that you have control of. And this is this is one of the things that this type of leader needs to figure out, how to integrate being the most effective leader with preserving the most effective version of himself in the process, right? So that is the Iron Leader. What do we got here? Elliot, what's up, homie? Good to see you. Tuhan Tom in the house. What's up, brother, man? Good to see you. All right. Elliot writes, in this day and age, how do you find a tribe? So many non-loyal and weak-minded people around. Well, in 3 roads, I talk about, what happens at the level of self. This is similar to, I see a lot of the frameworks that guys that like the pickup artists, right? They project, one of the things I see, and I don't mean to pigeonhole all of them, but a very common thing that I see them putting out there is projecting this persona that women respond to in that particular application. Not a fan, right? Not a fan of the whole thing. I'm not going to badmouth it, but just not a fan. But what I will say, from an individual standpoint, the whole pickup thing aside now, from an individual standpoint, when we learn how to powerfully be ourselves, we will attract those people that align with who we are, because how we conduct ourselves will resonate with them in a way that they see the potential for an alliance. So how do you build a tribe? One ally at a time. But none of that happens if you don't understand who you are first. I've made these different sort of catchphrases and sayings about this, over the years. One of them is there's a difference between community and company. Some people, they think they're surrounded by a lot of people, and so they're good. And then what happens is circumstances change, the temperature goes up, and all these people melt away. And this whole time they thought they were in a community. Turns out they just had company, right? So we have to understand, well, what do we want? If you have like a guy that wants to get married desperately, and he just picks any woman that'll say yes, it's like, all right, that's one way to get married. It's also a good way to get divorced, right? So, if there is a sequence here to be considered, and the sequence not only needs to be developed in order, but it also needs to be aligned in an ongoing way, right? Again, those of you that have read the 3 Roads of Power Manifesto, I break this down in a way that's a little bit more modular and formulaic. It's like there are some checks and balances that we could all apply to our life to see, okay, am I veering off mission here? But sometimes, without that sort of intent in how you're developing your life, people are reduced to, do I have money? Is everybody nice to me? Am I getting laid? Do I have trinkets and things? These very sometimes, disconnected symptoms in some cases of an aligned life, but they're treating it almost as these have a more causal relationship with having an aligned life. And it's just not the case, right? Tuan Tom writes, receiver-based pickup artists are fishers, not hunters. I love it. No pun intended on the fishing metaphor. Oh, right on, right on. White Boy Pat and I did an episode on pickup artists years ago. We called it LARPers of masculinity, right? Pickup artists, LARPers of masculinity. But maybe that's the people that hire the pickup artists become LARPers. Whatever. I'm fucking putting it down. Walking away. Chris Jones, what's up, brother, man? He says leading is challenging, and so many dynamics involved. Absolutely. Elliot says makes sense. Always struggle with self, won't lie. Yeah, I know, Elliot. I've known you for fucking 20-something years. Oh yeah, last marriage, true story. Oh, there you go. You are literally like a fucking walking infomercial for my stuff, Elliot. Get your shit together. We need the success story now, right? So you can make the thing. Tuan Tom says, fishermen look to present whatever fish they like. They're linked to doing whatever the fish want. They're slaves to the fish. Yes. Yes. So fucking good. So good. All right. So we got one more archetype here. You guys still keep writing those questions and comments. Let's bang this last one out, and then we'll bring it to a head. All right. So still leader is the ready leader. This is the person who understands, I got Tuan Tom on here. It's perfect connection. In SIOC and STG, they have the readiness triangle, right? And the readiness triangle is basically looking at when somebody says they are ready, a sort of criteria. And awareness, preparedness, and willingness are the three parts of that. When I first learned that from Tuan Tom, it was one of these things where, I like to give myself credit in my coaching for taking these abstract ideas and giving it a little bit more of a formulaic understanding. And with readiness, that readiness triangle was just a game changer for me. The steel leader is the person of the leader types that is ready to lead. So it is against that backdrop of what readiness is that I would call the steel leader the ready leader, right? So the steel leader possesses calm intensity, presence steadies a room without words. There's something to be said for a guy who knows who he is, and he doesn't have to appease anybody around him. What winds up happening is he becomes the anomaly in a room full of people unlike him. The steel leader experiences that. Rituals are automatic, training, implementation, connection, and recovery. He understands that these are the things I have to do to be who I am, to be who I am to the people who rely on me. It's not inconsistent. It's not in flux, right? There's no, gaps in understanding of who he's supposed to be and what he's supposed to do. Emotional state rarely wavers, chooses response over reaction. I'm from New York. I'm born and raised in the Bronx. So I tend to have a more sort of animated affect than most people. When I was younger, I was somebody who turned into the werewolf, when shit didn't go my way, admittedly. But my big energy should never be confused for a lack of emotional control. There's just a certain point of development from a leadership perspective that we never lose the context. And that's the way I've put it before in my coaching that I would share here. A strong leader never loses the context. Somebody cuts me off and tells me, throws the fucking bird, go fuck yourself, this like that. And I get out and slap the shit out of him. 99 people will watch that and go, well, that motherfucker deserved to get slapped. But there'll be that one guy that's going, why'd you slap him? I thought you were a dad. I thought you were a husband. I thought you were a boss. I thought you were a brother and a son. I thought you had something planned later on. I thought you were going somewhere in your car. Like, there's a difference in somebody who is disconnected from the context, and at the opposite end, the person who is always aware of the context. It's very difficult for the leader to lose context when he's at the steel level. He leads with consistency, not speeches. Brotherhood is selective and strong. Iron sharpens iron is the culture. I have a very small circle of close friends. There are people who I could call that will show up in a heartbeat, that I will show up for in a heartbeat. I have that level of loyalty. They have that level of loyalty. But what is relevant to this discussion is me and those people don't have that level of loyalty for everybody. So there is a point where you need to develop a criteria of who you're supposed to be around. What is the context of the alliance? How do we continue to generate the synergy that created the alliance in the first place? Or are we somebody who is so averse to movement and uncertainty that he's going to keep throwing good money after bad when it comes to the people that are in their lives, right? Commands respect through reliability, not dominance. You know, there's a point where you can control people with threats by dominating them. You could have them betray who they are and become more compliant or submissive. It is not an organically sustainable way to lead. It's a way to control. You look at Saddam Hussein. He's somebody who was absolutely an example of the tyrannical autocratic leader. He controlled everybody. He dominated them. He was also swinging from a rope when all was said and done, right? And betrayed by his own people. The steel leader conflict is handled with clarity. It's never personal. It's always principled. This is something that I've struggled with my entire life. I've always taken things personally. I've had to learn how to look at people and accept them from who they are. Because sometimes one of the things that we hold on to that's tyrannical is our expectations in other people. It's like, oh man, I was hoping he would take me up on that offer. I was hoping he'd do a better job. I was hoping he'd finish this thing. I was hoping, and you're let down that they didn't. But if you actually sat down and broke down who that individual is, who he's always shown himself to be, who you would objectively expect him to be, that doesn't match the expectation that you put in this one case. So this one case you wanted him to be, you will say, the tyrant will say, well, I wanted him to be better. I expected better. Well, not so fast. You expected different. I guess we could determine whether it was better or not. But you just wanted him to be different than who he is. And one of the things that's helped me navigate this is just accepting people for who they are. Accepting people for who they are. Very, very difficult for some people. For me, this was a monumental challenge most of my adult life. I'd be lying if I said I'm completely squared away with this is concerned also, because I always have to find myself balancing from a position of being a coach, right? I have to give people feedback, and I have to make sure that I'm always connected to the context of who they are. Because if I lose that context, it's very easy to either become tyrannical or be perceived as tyrannical. So it's something that I always have to be aware of, right? The steel leader's mission is explicit and operational. Value drives his decisions daily. Again, this is an alignment commentary. He understands what he's trying to do. Who am I? It's like, here's this dilemma in your life, and you have to solve it. The first question isn't, how do I solve it? It's who am I and the how do I solve it? Who do I have to be? One of the biggest, creators of trauma in individuals, you'll see this in war, or the feedback of people who have been traumatized dysfunctionally by combat. They had to do something that was aligned with their tribal obligations, but completely misaligned with who they were at the level of self. You had to shoot the toddler. Why? Because the toddler had a bomb vest and was running towards us. But I didn't want to shoot a toddler. Well, what happened if you didn't shoot the toddler? 15 of my brothers would be dead. So you had to shoot the toddler. Yeah, but I didn't want to have to shoot a toddler. So this dissonance, this inability to sort of reconcile these two things is what creates so much stress and trauma in an individual. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, meaning there's a collection of symptoms that are attributed to his reaction to stress, the stress that was caused by a trauma. Right? So we say PTSD, it's people have done things they weren't capable of doing at the level of self. Oftentimes when that happens, it's because they were able to do it at one of the other two roads. Tribally, they were able to do it. At the value stage, they were able to do it, but they never squared it away first with the individual level. This is not what I do, right? And finally here, time is weaponized, every hour points at purpose, 24-hour cycle integrated. Master the 24-hour cycle. There's a link in the description if you haven't watched the program yet. I talk about one of the easiest things, the most accessible things a man could do to sort of change the trajectory of his life is master his day. Not perfect it, but master it. Masters aren't perfect, right? You could master your day. How? Go to the program. It's free, and watch it. But the idea is, and I said this earlier, time is the most valuable resource you have. So when we learn how to leverage that, it becomes a superpower, for what we're trying to create. Now, the Steel leader's leadership style, he's the acquired authority. His influence is measured in a ripple effect. He does small moves that ripple into the tribe and into his areas of influence to produce the results that he's responsible for creating. He isn't somebody that's a hammer looking for a nail. He's the one that gets everybody to do what he wants them to do without losing his mind in the process. What does the leader, the Steel leader, do under pressure? His focus narrows. His execution sharpens. You ever see that movie, those series of movies, was it The Equalizer? Denzel Washington, pretty good movies. Apparently, they took Queen Latifah and they made a TV show out of it. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the Denzel one. I could watch some Denzel stuff. And in it, when he's about to go to work, everything slows down and he starts seeing things at a level of focus that really disconnects the other things in his purview. And I think it's a great, visual for this point of what happens to the Steel leader under pressure. What does the Steel leader need in terms of forging? Where is his need in all of this? Transmission. He has to pass this on to the people he's connected to. He must multiply the alignment in others, right? Tuan Tom and I have had some great conversations on teaching and how, somebody will do something without even understanding what they're doing. But if you ask them how do they do it, they'll tell you something, and they'll do it in earnest. They'll legitimately try to describe to you what it is that they're doing. Ask Michael Jordan how to, cut to the hoop. Ask I don't know. I'm trying not to date myself with my sport analogies. I was going to say Dan Marino. Does anybody know who fucking Dan Marino is anymore? Ask an NFL quarterback how to throw the ball. He'll tell you some stuff. He'll think about it and he'll say, oh, this makes sense. And he'll tell you that. He'll remember some of the things that his coaches told him and he'll regurgitate that. But does he actually know? Not really, because he's not a coach. He's an operator. The steel leader, what he needs, that sort of last level that he needs to tap into, is his ability to create the formulas, the seeds of his formulas, and be able to plant them in those that follow him. That's where he's at. All right, so let me hit some questions. I'm going to take this off. Oh, Jesus. All right, there you go. I started getting scared for a second. All right, what do we got? All right. Elliot says, it's true. I wish I had spent my youth preparing for the winter rather than chasing skirt around. Absolutely. Absolutely. Two on Tom. I wish I had a mentor like Master Chin when I was younger. I had my teachers, but young men today are lucky to have access to MC at this stage of development. I appreciate that, brother. And, you're not doing too bad yourself, my man. I've always said, one of the ways that you could measure a man is looking at the quality of his sons. And, I know two on Tom's sons, and they are the epitome of what a strong father could do for young men. So he's giving me compliments, but as you can tell, I'm not good at taking compliments. I'm grateful nonetheless. Elliot says, so true. I was lucky to get him when I was 27. He helped me a ton. Even in my training, my new jiu-jitsu instructor can see the jungle gym imprinted in my DNA and how I conduct myself. Yeah, you were in the forge when it was hottest, Elliot, and you came out unscathed. And I'm glad you're still getting after it, and that's 100% true. Two on Tom says Alan Watts' Detachment is a good talk. I'll check it out. Obviously, I'm a huge Alan Watts fan. What I try to do, it's hard for me to get my kids to sort of become interested in Alan Watts. So one of the things I do is I take the Alan Watts like lo-fi YouTube videos and I put them on. In my house, there's always lo-fi playing on the TV as sort of like background music. My kids will grow up like thinking that we had a soundtrack in the family. And what I'll do is I'll put it on. There's a lot of fake ones out. I would tell you guys to just make sure you're not following one of the fake ones. A lot of AI generated stuff that just synthesizes his content into new content. But if it's not literally the Alan Watts channel, another one you can look at is the Akira the Don videos. He's got a lot of great stuff. But his Alan Watts stuff is on point. Or you could just look at the ones that have video of him, because he did a public access show for years. And there's a lot of content, a lot of video of him talking. And it's definitely worth checking out. Caleb, what's up, Caleb? He says, I just had this conversation with my wife this morning on expectation management with people at work. It creates so much of the negative energy when expectation doesn't align with reality. Man, it don't get any truer than that. And I'll tell you, I just had a conversation with one of my guys who was just having a conversation with his wife. And he was sharing with me one of the biggest challenges that she had is in managing her expectation of people she's connected to. And he was asking for my take on how he could better prepare her to get to the point where he is already, right? This idea where we accept people for who they are. But it is a challenge. And, one of the things that it's very hard to sort of integrate into your awareness when you're in a work situation is there's also the individuals vying for their sense of self there, right? They want their status, their significance. They want to avoid the landmines of their own aversions, and they're using all these things to influence how they conduct themselves. So sometimes it's not as sort of linear as we would like it. And, I will say just taking the position that I'm going to build my expectations based on the vetted feedback that their actions have provided me, that is the way that you will reduce, if not outright eliminate, the sort of contempt and frustration of people letting you down, I just made an example earlier of the virtual assistant, the freelancer that I hired to do this one job for me, and seemed like a decent enough guy, but he shit the bed. He didn't meet deadlines. He fucked up some other stuff, and I don't think it was malicious. I don't even think it was just a lack of qualification. It wasn't a skill issue, as the kids say. It was really he just didn't have the accountability and the work ethic to do what I needed. So it's like, hey, when it happened, I'm not mad at the guy or anything like that. It's like, hey, thanks for everything. Appreciate it. I'll give you a good review. Don't worry on the things that I could review well. But it's like, okay, on to the next thing. You got to keep it going. And I admit, 10, 20 years ago, I'd be rambling on to everybody. This fucking guy fucked this thing up, and now I got to do this and it would be the cathartic process that would help me sort of placate the stress and satisfy the stress removal that was created just because I had an expectation I shouldn't have. There's a great, talk about Alan Watts. If you guys have seen it, the Chinese fisherman parable. There's a bunch of versions of it. I've heard other people say it. Like don't fucking listen to Alan Watts say it. Like, just do yourself a favor. Nobody's gonna say it as well as him. My man could tell stories, and he taught. I'm definitely not going to repeat it. Right? I'm not going to say it. But if you haven't watched it, basically no spoiler alert. But the lesson that it shares is when things happen to you, you have to react like you really don't understand what the implications are fully of this. It's like at any point, we can look at this different ways. I look at it as, through the Bayesian logic, lens where it's like, well, I have certain information. Let me not develop a complete position based on this incomplete information. Let's just go as we go. It's like when the freelancer let me down, if I reacted negatively, it would be because I thought that wasn't possible. So it's almost like he is destroying my worldview when he breaks the expectation. The whole thing is, like when I hire him, it's maybe not unsaid, but it's certainly the state of my relationship with the alliance that if he fucks up, okay, he fucks up, and then I just do what I do when he fucks up. It like you just keep it moving. His actions are going to determine how I'm going to navigate the alliance. But there's only so much I can know at the beginning, right? I mean, I'm under the impression, it's my position that the majority of people that get divorced didn't know they were going to get divorced when they got married, Save a couple of green card issues here and there, I'm sure. But, or, some gold diggers. But when you have somebody who's getting divorced, it's because you navigated this thing that you had committed to for life, right? Till death do us part. Not till death of the marriage do us part. It's supposed to be you're dead, but there is feedback that they've gotten that just didn't meet their expectations to the point where they wanted to opt out, right? So one of the ways you can look at it is through that Bayesian lens. Another way you can look at it is through if you guys have ever heard of the OODA loop, right? I was first introduced to the OODA loop by, again, Tu Tom. And observe, orient, decide, act. It's like, okay, the freelancer fucks up on me. That is what I see. Where is my mission in the context of that? What are my options? Let me choose which option I'm going to take and act, engage. So there's a bunch of different ways we can look at this. The way that we organically tend to look at it as, I'm going to build all these expectations and assumptions, based on patterns that I've seen before. It's very natural for people to do that. Elliot says Denzel shows the tunnel vision and auditory exclusion. Yeah, it's pretty good. I definitely need to check out 24-hour cycle. My time management could use some work. Make it happen. I once bought, and this is not even a joke. Like it's going to sound like a Rodney Dangerfield joke. It's not. I once bought like a $500 memory program, and I forgot that I bought it. I literally bought it when I lived 2 houses ago and discovered it in a box like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, oh, I remember this. So don't talk about it. Be about it. Because you might forget about it eventually. Chris Jones says you were born too late. Needed you in the 70s. Well, I was around in the 70s. I was just like 5, you know. But yeah, man, like we all like listen, I needed this version of myself when I was a teenager. But you know, it's like when somebody asks me, you know, do you have any regrets in life? My immediate response is absolutely not. Because if like sometimes they're asking me, is there a significant mistake I've made in my life? You ask me that, oh fuck, like sit down, I got some stuff to tell you. But do I have any regrets? It's like, no, I can't have a regret. Number one, I don't have a time machine, right? So it's kind of moot. But the implications of thinking in terms of regret means what? Any mistake that I made over 10 years ago, I go and change. If I do that, I might not have my daughter who's 10 years old. Go past 18, 19 years old, I don't have my son. Go past 21, 22 years, I don't have a wife. Go past 25 years, I don't even have jujitsu. Go like, at what point am I willing to throw out who I am just because I made a mistake that somehow I think it would be better if I didn't make it? You know, the people, I've said this before, the people that look to eliminate suffering from life are looking to betray the only teacher or the greatest teacher that mankind has ever had. Suffering is the greatest teacher mankind has ever had. Yet here we are, usually with absolutely zero gratitude for it. We don't have to appreciate it in the moment, but we certainly need to have gratitude for the system that includes it. When you're in the middle of the shit, like it's supposed to suck. It's supposed to be terrible. But the system outside of that terrible situation is that when you recover, you're going to recover stronger if that's the path you choose. And without that stressor, there wouldn't be the adaptation. That's how it works. You want the big muscles, you got to lift the big weights. That's the way that works. You know, so if you want to betray gratitude, start talking about regret. What the fuck is this woman talking about? I appreciate the great thing. Get the fuck out of here. The fuck is she rambling on about? Fucking Dr. Solomon and herbs. Get out of here. Oh man, they're after me. There's a bunch of them now. I don't know. I got a bunch of bots attacking my comments now. That might help me, right? It helps my engagement. I'll tell you what. Anybody watching this, do not buy any of Dr. Solomon's stuff because apparently he's a piece of shit that invades other people's live streams. All right. Fucking A. Let's end on that note. Fuck Dr. Solomon. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys for watching. If you guys are still here, and there's a bunch of you I could see that are still tracking. I created the leadership alignment assessment. I literally just launched it this morning. If you guys check it out, you'll be some of the first ones to do so. I shared it with a couple of Mastermind members earlier. The link's there. It's free. Take about 3 minutes. You'll see in the question some of the things that we should be tracking. You're going to get a customized report of results based on the outcomes of the assessment. And I think you guys will really appreciate it. Check it out. The link's in the description. And I appreciate you guys for hanging out. I'll be here next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.